She packed her brother's Nightlight into her own suitcase because she was the one leaving, not him. 3 days before their adoption hearing, my mother sent a 12-year-old a text that started with, "Once she's out of the picture." If you think that message was about a stranger, it wasn't. It was about my daughter. Stay till the end, because what that judge said to my mother in that courtroom is something I don't think I'll ever forget, and subscribe if you believe no kid should ever have to earn the right to stay. The suitcase wheels were the loudest thing in the house. I found Marisol in the garage at 11 p.m., hoodie zipped to her chin, dragging our dad's old rolling suitcase toward the side door like she'd rehearsed this 100 times, and knowing her, she probably had. "Mari, it's almost midnight." She didn't turn around. "I called a cab. It's coming to the gas station on 5th. You're 12. I'm old enough to know when I'm not wanted." Her voice cracked on the last word, and that's when I saw it. Her little brother Dante's Nightlight, the dinosaur one, sticking out of the side pocket of her bag. She'd packed it for him, not for herself. My stomach dropped straight through the concrete floor. "Where's this coming from?" She finally turned around, and her eyes were dry, which scared me more than crying would have. "Aunt Rhonda said if I act out one more time, they're not going to finalize Dante's adoption. She said I'm the reason this whole thing might fall apart, so I'm removing the reason." I want you to sit with that for a second. A 12-year-old girl standing in a cold garage at midnight, ready to walk out into the dark alone because the adults in her life convinced her that loving her little brother meant disappearing for him. Before I tell you how my own family turned a kid who never did anything but protect her brother into the problem, I need you to understand something. I almost let it happen. I almost believed them too. Rewind 6 months. If you're just finding this channel, I'm Alina, and I'm a single foster to adopt parent in Ohio. 6 months before that night in the garage, Marisol and Dante moved in with me. Dante was 5, round-cheeked, obsessed with dinosaurs, the kind of kid who hugs you before he even learns your name. Marisol was 12, and she didn't hug anybody. She checked the locks on every window in the house the first night. She asked where I kept my phone before she asked where the bathroom was. I understood why the second I read their file. These two had been through 3 placements in 2 years. 2 of those placements, Marisol had been sent back, alone, while Dante stayed, twice. At 12 years old, she'd already learned the cruelest math in the foster system. Sweet, small, and easy gets to stay. Watchful, guarded, and 12 does not. So she made herself indispensable to Dante instead. She knew his nightmares started around 2 a.m. She knew he needed the hallway light on a specific angle or he wouldn't sleep. She taught him a little trick. Tap your knuckles on the wall 3 times, and somebody taps back, and that means you're not alone. It worked better than any therapist's advice I'd read. I promised myself I'd never make her choose between being safe and being needed. I broke that promise slowly, one Sunday dinner at a time. My mother, Carol, adored Dante from the second she met him, called him her little buddy, bought him a dinosaur backpack, let him help her bake, even though he mostly just ate the chocolate chips. Marisol got a gift card, handed over without eye contact, like a receipt. I told myself Carol just needed time to warm up to a guarded preteen. I told myself the same thing for months, and every single time I told myself that, Marisol was standing 3 feet away, watching exactly how much room was left in this family for a girl who didn't smile on command. Then came the photo. My sister Brianna wanted one nice family picture before Thanksgiving, matching sweaters, the whole thing. She arranged my parents and Dante by the fireplace. When Marisol stepped into frame, Brianna said without even lowering her phone, "Can you scoot back a little, sweetie? Just want the little ones for this one." Marisol didn't argue. She just stepped back, until she was standing by the doorway, out of frame entirely, watching her little brother get photographed like he was the only kid in this house. I saw it happen, and I said nothing, because I told myself one awkward photo wasn't worth starting a fight over Thanksgiving dinner. That silence is the reason Marisol was standing in a garage 6 months later with a packed suitcase and her brother's Nightlight zipped into the side pocket. Because here's what I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't find out until 3 days before the adoption hearing, when Dante's tablet lit up on the kitchen counter with a message that made my blood run cold, sent from a number I recognized instantly. Once Marisol's out of the picture, Dante can finally have a normal family. Don't let this drag on. It was from my mother. I stood in my kitchen at 11 p.m., staring at my mother's name on a 5-year-old's tablet, and felt something in my chest go completely still. Once Marisol's out of the picture, Dante can finally have a normal family. I read it 4 times. I kept waiting for it to say something different. It didn't. Dante was asleep. Marisol was still out there in the garage, suitcase packed, waiting on a cab she called with a burner app she must have downloaded weeks ago, because kids who've been sent back twice don't improvise an escape plan at midnight. They rehearse it. I walked out to the garage, and I didn't say a word about the message. Not yet. I just took the suitcase handle out of her hand. "You're not leaving this house tonight." "If I stay, they're going to take him too." Her voice was flat, not angry. Flat is worse than angry. Flat means a kid has already made peace with losing. "Who told you that?" She looked at the floor. "Aunt Rhonda said it at dinner. Grandma agreed with her. They said a judge might let you keep Dante if I tell the caseworker I don't want to be adopted." I want you to understand what I felt in that moment, because if you've ever loved a kid who the rest of your family decided wasn't the easy one, you already know. It's not just anger. It's this sick, sliding realization that every soft excuse you've made for your relatives for 6 straight months has just detonated in your 12-year-old's hands. I took the bag from her. I am not becoming Dante's mother by proving every adult who gave up on you was right. She didn't answer. She let me walk her back inside. But she didn't sleep that night, and neither did I. Because now I had a text message with my mother's name on it, and I needed to know how deep this actually went. Here's where I have to back up again, because the messages didn't start that night. They'd been going for weeks, and I'd missed every sign. Marisol had started doing something I'd noticed but never questioned, screenshotting things. Every time her phone buzzed, she'd glance at it, tap twice, and lock the screen. I figured it was normal 7th grade drama. Group chat, some boy, whatever 12-year-olds argue about now. It wasn't a boy. It was my mother and my sister, running a 2-week campaign to convince a 12-year-old that the kindest thing she could do for her brother was request her own removal. The messages started soft. "Marisol, sometimes the most loving thing an older sibling can do is give the younger one room to just be a normal kid." Then they got specific. "The agency looks at whether a placement feels settled. If you tell your caseworker you'd do better somewhere with older kids, it could really help Dante's case." Then, 3 days before the hearing, they stopped pretending to be gentle at all. "If Alina has to fight the agency over you, Dante could lose this home too. You're old enough to ask for a placement that fits you better." They were teaching a 12-year-old how to write her own rejection letter and calling it maturity. I confronted my mother on the phone that night. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down. "You've been messaging Marisol directly, telling her she needs to request a different placement?" I was trying to help her understand what's realistic, Alina. You cannot seriously adopt a child with her history and expect Dante to have a normal life around that kind of tension. Her history is that she's been abandoned twice by adults who decided she was too much work, and you just did it a 3rd time, over text, so there'd be a paper trail pointing at her instead of you. Don't be dramatic. "I have the messages, Mom." Silence. Real silence, the kind where you can hear someone recalculating. "You're twisting this into something ugly," she finally said. "Everything I did came from wanting what's best for Dante." "You never once asked what was best for both of them. You asked what was easiest for you at Thanksgiving." I hung up before she could turn it around on me again. Because that's what she always did, every single time, for 6 months. Make one warm comment about Dante, one cold silence toward Marisol, and somehow by the end of the conversation I'd be the one apologizing for reading too much into it. Not this time. The adoption hearing for both kids was 3 days away, and now I had a decision to make that I never should have had to make in the first place. Walk into that courtroom with proof that my own mother and sister had spent 2 weeks manipulating a traumatized 12-year-old into giving up her home, or stay quiet, keep the peace, and let Marisol believe, for the rest of her life, that she really had been the reason her family almost didn't happen. I called the caseworker, Dana, at 7 the next morning. "I need to send you something," I said, "and I need you to tell me honestly, does this blow up Friday's hearing?" There was a pause on the line I didn't like. "Send it," Dana said. "Then we'll talk about what Friday looks like." Dana called back 40 minutes later, and I could tell from her voice before she even said a word that this was worse than I'd braced for. "I compared the messages you sent to the notes your mother submitted to the agency last month," she said. "Alina, your mother filed a written concern that Marisol was increasingly withdrawn and resistant to bonding with the family. That report is dated the same week she was privately telling a 12-year-old that requesting removal would help her brother." I had to put the phone down on the counter for a second, not hang up, just set it down, because my hand wasn't steady enough to hold it anymore. She'd built a paper trail 2 different ways, one version for the caseworker painting Marisol as the problem, one version for Marisol herself, convincing her the solution was to volunteer to disappear. 2 stories aimed at 2 different audiences, both pointing the exact same direction. "Does this stop Friday?" I asked. "It might delay it. The judge needs time to review interference like this properly. I won't lie to you. A delay could go either way for how it looks on paper." Dana's voice softened. "But Alina, if you sit on this to protect Friday's timeline, and it surfaces later anyway, it'll look like you knew and stayed quiet. I don't think that's who you want to be in this." She was right. And more than that, I was done being someone who stayed quiet to keep a nice dinner from getting awkward. That instinct is exactly what had gotten us here. "Send the full report," I said. "Both petitions. I'm not doing this halfway." I found Marisol at the kitchen table 20 minutes later, and I did something I probably should have done the very first week she moved in. I sat down across from her and told her the truth, all of it, without softening a single sentence. "Your grandmother has been messaging you for 2 weeks, telling you that leaving would help Dante. She also told the caseworker you were resistant to bonding. Both of those came from her. I have proof." Marisol's face did something I hadn't seen it do in 6 months. It cracked. Not tears exactly. More like a wall coming down 1 brick at a time. "I didn't make it up," she whispered. "I wasn't imagining it." "No, you weren't. And I am so sorry it took me this long to believe you enough to check. You're gonna lose Dante because of me." Her hands were shaking around her mug. "That's what she said would happen if you tried to fight for both of us." I reached across the table, not grabbing, just resting my hand near hers so she could close the distance if she wanted to. She did. "Listen to me. If a judge tells me I can only adopt one of you, I walk out of that courtroom with neither. I am not building a family by proving her right about you. You are not a bargaining chip, Marisol. You are my daughter, and you have been since the day you taught Dante that tapping trick so he'd stop having nightmares." She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, so quiet I almost missed it, nobody's ever chosen both before. That sentence is the one that stayed with me longer than almost anything else in this whole story. The night before the hearing, my family invited us to dinner. I almost said no. Every instinct told me to say no. But Dana had mentioned that the court would look at whether I had a support network, and some stubborn, hopeful part of me still wanted to believe one honest conversation could fix 6 months of damage. I was wrong, but I had to find that out the hard way, one more time. My mother had made a cake. It said almost a family in cursive icing, which, in hindsight, was an almost perfect summary of the whole problem. My sister Brianna had her phone out before we'd even taken our coats off. "One quick picture before dinner gets cold," she said, already arranging my parents and Dante by the fireplace like she'd done it before. Because she had. Marisol stood at the edge of the frame. Nobody moved to include her. I stepped into the photo myself and put my hand on her shoulder instead. "We're all in this one, or nobody is." Brianna lowered the phone, annoyed. "Can we not do this tonight?" Mom made an effort. "Mom sent a 12-year-old 2 weeks of messages convincing her to give up her home," I said. I think effort isn't the word I'd use. The room went dead silent. My father set down his fork. My mother's face went through about 4 different expressions before landing on something that looked almost like relief. The relief of someone who's been caught and, on some level, wanted to be. "I was trying to help her make a mature decision," she said. "Dante deserves stability. Marisol has a lot going on. I thought a different placement might actually be kinder to her." "She's 12. You made her think loving her brother meant erasing herself. That's not kindness. That's the exact thing that's been done to her by every adult who's failed her before you." My mother's chin came up. "You're choosing a stranger's trauma over your own family." "She's not a stranger. She's my daughter. And you're the one who chose which grandchild to keep. You just tried to make it look like it was her idea." Nobody ate the cake. Marisol sat next to me, rigid, silent, watching the family that had spent 6 months deciding she was too much, finally get called out loud in the room with nowhere to hide from it. We left before dessert. In the car, Dante asked if there'd still be pancakes tomorrow after court. I told him yes. Marisol stared out the window and didn't say a single word the whole ride home. I didn't know yet that she'd already made a decision of her own, one that would come out the next morning in front of a judge before I'd even had the chance to ask her what she wanted. The courthouse hallway smelled like coffee and floor wax, and Marisol hadn't said more than 10 words since we walked in. She kept looking at the door like it might swallow one of us whole. "If I say yes to this," she asked, so quiet I almost missed it, "can they still take Dante away because of me?" I crouched down so we were eye level. "No, and if anyone tries, they go through me first." My mother, my sister, and my father were already inside when we walked in. Carol had worn her good blue blazer, the one she saved for church and weddings, like this was a day worth dressing up for. Brianna had her phone out again before we'd even sat down. I didn't say anything this time. I just looked at her until she put it away. Judge Alvarez had a folder in front of her thicker than I expected. Dana stood first. "Your Honor, supplemental material was submitted yesterday regarding communication sent to the minor Marisol in the weeks leading up to this hearing. We believe it directly affected the consent process and requires review before finalization." She didn't editorialize. She just handed the packet up and sat back down. That was almost scarier than if she'd made a speech, like the messages didn't need any help condemning themselves. The judge read in silence for a long minute, then she read one line out loud, and I watched my mother's whole posture change. "Once Marisol's out of the picture, Dante can finally have a normal family. Don't let this drag on." "Mrs. Reyes," the judge said, "did you send this message to a 12-year-old child?" My mother's hands were folded so tightly in her lap her knuckles had gone white. I was trying to help her understand what would be best for her brother. Why was a 12-year-old made responsible for whether a 5-year-old kept his home? "That's not—" My mother stopped, started again. I didn't intend for it to sound like a threat. "You told her that if she didn't request removal, her brother could lose his placement. That is, by definition, a threat, regardless of intent." The judge set the papers down. A child's consent to adoption has to be her own. It cannot be manufactured by convincing her that another child's safety depends on her disappearing. Brianna leaned forward like she wanted to jump in and rescue the moment. "Your Honor, Dante is just easier. He's affectionate, he's little, he doesn't come with issues. We just wanted to give him a normal childhood." I felt something in me go very cold and very clear at the same time. 6 months of context clicked into place in front of a judge who was hearing it for the first time and understanding it instantly, the way I should have understood it from week 1. "They're not two different childhoods to divide up," I said before anyone asked me to speak. "They're siblings. Dante got called easy because he learned early that smiling kept adults kind to him. Marisol got called difficult because she never stopped watching the exits, because 2 families before mine already sent her back once each. That's not a personality flaw, Your Honor. That's a kid who's been taught that love runs out." Dana spoke next, and she didn't flinch away from the hard part either. "The agency does not recommend separating these siblings. Marisol's history includes real safety concerns that remain part of her ongoing treatment plan. We're not pretending otherwise. But the record shows a coordinated effort to manufacture her consent to leave, which invalidates that consent entirely. We recommend finalizing both adoptions with continued family support." Judge Alvarez turned to me. "Ms. Reyes-Cole, knowing everything now, do you wish to proceed with both petitions?" "Yes, Your Honor, both." "And if I told you today that only one petition could move forward?" I'd already answered this question for myself, alone in my kitchen, 2 nights before. Saying it out loud in a courtroom didn't make it any less true. "Then I withdraw both. I'm not building a family by proving to a 12-year-old that she was right to think she didn't belong in one." Marisol made a small sound beside me, not quite a sob, more like something finally exhaling after holding its breath for 6 months. Then the judge did something I hadn't expected. She looked directly at Marisol, not at me, not at Dana, not at my mother. "Marisol, I need to hear it from you. Not what you think your brother needs, not what you think you're allowed to want. What do you want?" Marisol's mouth opened, and I watched her almost reach for the rehearsed answer, the one my mother had spent 2 weeks coaching into her. "Dante can stay without me." I saw it sitting right there on her tongue. Then she looked at Dante, who was swinging his feet in the chair next to her, completely unaware that the next sentence out of her mouth would decide both their lives, and something in her face just let go. "I want to stay," she said, voice shaking but clear. "I didn't think I was allowed to want that." Dante reached over and grabbed her hand without even looking up from his shoelaces, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Do we get the same adoption day?" he asked. The judge almost smiled. "Yes, the exact same day." We left the courthouse holding 2 adoption certificates, 1 stuffed dinosaur backpack, and a silence none of us quite knew how to fill yet. Dante wanted pancakes. Of course he did. Some things about a 5-year-old never change, no matter what kind of morning he's just lived through. We found a diner 2 blocks away with red booths and a clock shaped like a coffee mug. Dante set both certificates on the table next to the napkin holder and checked on them every few minutes like they might vanish if he looked away too long. Marisol kept hers folded in her lap, one hand resting on top of it the whole meal. "Is that it?" Dante asked, syrup halfway to his mouth. "Are we a family now?" "We've been a family for months, buddy," I told him. "Today just made it official on paper." Marisol looked out the window for a long moment before she said anything. "Legal's harder to undo, though, right?" I understood exactly what she was really asking, not about paperwork, about whether this was the kind of promise that survives a bad week, a slammed door, a relapse into old fears. "Legal means nobody can send you back because you had a rough month," I said. "Nobody can decide you're too much work anymore. That decision's done. Forever isn't a word I'm going to throw around lightly with you, because I know what that word has cost you before. But legal, that one's real, and it's yours." She didn't answer, but she unfolded the certificate just slightly and let it sit open on the table for the rest of breakfast. My mother sent an email 2 days later. She was sorry things had gotten so painful. Every decision had come from love, she wrote, and she hoped I'd eventually understand that good intentions sometimes look harsh from the outside. I read it once. I didn't argue with a single line. I wrote back 4 sentences. No unsupervised contact with either child. Any future visits would include both kids together, never one without the other, and only if the girls themselves wanted it someday. This wasn't punishment. It was the minimum condition required for trust to even begin rebuilding. Brianna called an hour later, furious, accusing me of blowing up the whole family over one bad judgment call. I didn't take the bait. 6 months earlier, I would have softened it, found some middle ground to keep the peace at the next holiday. Not anymore. I let her finish, and then I hung up without apologizing for a boundary that had cost a 12-year-old her sense of safety to teach me I needed. My father called separately, and to his credit, he didn't defend anyone. "I heard those conversations happening in my own house," he said. "I should have said something. I didn't. I'm not going to pretend that's nothing." It wasn't everything, but it was the first honest thing anyone in that family had said to me in 6 months, and I told him so. 6 weeks later, Marisol got invited on a 2-night school trip, an art retreat 2 hours away, sketchbooks, and a hotel and a bus full of 7th graders who'd probably sing the same song on repeat for 4 hours straight. Her first answer was no. What if Dante needs me? What if something happens? Then I'll handle it. That's what I'm here for. She looked almost offended at how confidently I said it. Then she looked over at Dante, who was coloring at the table, oblivious, and held up 4 fingers at him. Their old signal, the tap code she built for him back when she'd been the only steady thing in his life. He grinned and tapped 4 times back on the table without even glancing up. "I can do the taps with Alina while you're gone," he said, like it was obvious. Like he'd been rehearsing his own independence, too. Marisol packed for that trip with the same duffel bag she'd once packed to run away with. This time it had sketch pencils, 2 bags of pretzels, and an extra sweater she couldn't decide between. She left the family dinosaur Nightlight on Dante's shelf right where it belonged. She came home Friday complaining that the hotel eggs tasted like wet paper and that some kid had sung the same chorus for the entire bus ride. Dante barreled into her the second she walked through the door. She hugged him back, but she didn't check the windows first. Didn't scan the room for what might have gone wrong while she was away. She just dropped her bag by the stairs and asked if there was anything to eat. The first time she packed that bag, she was leaving to save her brother. The second time, she packed it because she finally believed she had somewhere worth coming back to.